Today's episode is brought to you by Cobia. Designed by anglers, Cobia boats are the perfect balance of fishing smarts and comfort. It's not just best-in-class quality and performance, they have superior hull design, intelligent deck layouts, and more user-friendly helms. Cobia boats are family-friendly while maintaining that tournament-grade fishing performance. Check out their full lineup of center and dual consoles at CobiaBoats.com and give them a follow on social at Cobia Boats. Choose Cobia and have it all. Welcome to another episode of the On the Water podcast. This week, our guest, I'm going to let Anthony talk to him. One of the saltiest characters, it sounds like.
Yeah, had Eric DeHedeville on the podcast. Pretty much a lifer on Cape Cod, real salty guy. Was along for the ride of the Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket and Cape Cod pursuit of Swordfish on the Harpoon. So basically was around for when that fishery got pioneered and got going, and shares a bunch of awesome stories. Big bass fisherman, just a fishy guy, fishes for everything, and has some pretty crazy stories, and was an absolute blast to talk to. So excited for this one to get out to everybody. And what do you got, Jim, for the intro here?
Yeah, we haven't done one of these in a little bit. We haven't done the little intro kind of where we surveyed the good people who follow On the Water on Instagram. And because it's mid-September now, getting into the fall, and it's kind of the season of plenty. This is when I most think about, I guess I'm eating seafood consistently from the start of the saltwater season, but I get most interested in it now. It's probably
have the mercury checked. We already lost one fish eater.
Yeah, Andy Nabreski in our office got his mercury checked, and the doctor said no more tuna for at least 6 months. Yeah. So you know what the best way to not have that happen is not get your mercury checked. So I'll worry about that in a little bit. But we asked the people on Instagram, what is your go-to preparation for your catch of the day? So if you've been fishing and you consistently catch fish, or catch fish to keep and eat, I feel like everybody has their own kind of roster of go-to recipes, and mine has definitely developed over the years. I used to be the old with bluefish. It was just not Sally's, Jane's Crazy Salt. Put that on the grill, and it's why to this day I really don't love bluefish, because of just kind of ODing on that. Also frying the fish is a go-to, but you can't just do that every time. There's too many good ways to prepare fish. So before we talk about some of our go-tos, some of our favorite ones, I'm going to go through what some of the people said on Instagram. What surprised me was that the most popular answer by far was ceviche. That people said their go-to recipe when they catch some fish is to turn into ceviche. And I do like ceviche, but I don't make it very often. I know you get into it.
Yeah, I bet you if we extended this poll internationally, that'd probably be number one. That's a very common way of preparing fish, and I'm a fan of it. It's something that you can typically get away with doing with whatever you have on hand, which is nice. So it doesn't really get into a super elaborate prep. You need some fruit juice that has acid, and some vegetables, and whatever else you have around for herbs, and you can pretty much do it however you want. It's a lot like poke in that regard.
Yeah, so what ceviche is, it's a South American dish, is where it originated, and it's marinated raw fish that's garnished with, assorted vegetables, and then it's kind of served as an appetizer with crackers or chips. You can dip it with chips, but it is, to say it's raw isn't totally accurate. It's not quite sushi because you're using a lot of citrus juice on it, typically lime, correct?
Cooks it, yeah. Typically.
And that kind of, cooks it. I don't know if you want to say it cooks it, but it
I think it cooks it.
Yeah.
It's not raw anymore. It turns the color to a cooked-looking piece of fish. You really just need meat, fish, right? And then you need the citrus juice, heat, and sweet. And that's wherever you take it from there is up to you. It changes in all different parts of the world. There's different, kind of local ways of doing it.
And there's certain species you want to do this with.
Yeah.
You don't want to do it with, don't do it with a largemouth bass. You'll end up with a tapeworm. Do it with mahi, I know you like doing ceviche with. I've done it with black sea bass, good with fluke, good with scup.
I lean towards the white fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess some of the darker fish like, bluefish and Spanish mackerel and stuff like that, it works fine with.
Yeah, Spanish mackerel I've heard of. Bluefish ceviche, I don't know.
I know people that have done it. No, I haven't done it, but I know people that love it. I would do it. I think that would probably be pretty good. We did some, I think Spanish or Cerro mackerel before when I cast. After our annual fishing trip out of Jupiter, we kept some, and that was great. And I usually will put all the ingredients together before I go offshore when I know there will be mahi at play. And you package it all together with everything but the mahi. And then the first mahi that comes over the rail, I just, quickly fillet it, cube it up, and throw it in there and throw it back in the cooler and leave it. Usually that's a canyon trip, but by the time the next morning rolls around, you break out the Tostitos and you're eating fresh ceviche. It's a pretty cool thing as a thank you when you're getting invited on the boat.
So one note, South Boston Pete, who responded to our question, said if it's real fresh and clean and has no sign of parasites, ceviche every time. So the parasites too, like I don't know that I do it with cod or haddock then.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't.
With the cod worms and everything. So fish, or at least the parasites aren't big enough that you see. Pretty much every fish you catch is going to have some level of parasites, but the cod worms that you tend to see, and I mean I've been seeing them in sea bass now too.
Yeah.
But before you do it, just take a look at the fillet and just cut around the stuff. Those worms aren't going to kill you anyhow, but it's just kind of gross. The other most popular one, second to ceviche, was blackening. And blackening was a recipe developed by Chef Prudhomme I believe it was a Louisiana chef. And the history, the local lore of it is that people were catching all these big red drum, couldn't find a good preparation for it. He discovered this blackening technique that worked with the dense, meat, kind of, meaty. I don't think red drum's fishy, but just it's got a little, it's gamey. Let's call it gamey.
Yeah.
So blackening that was so delicious and so effective that it nearly wiped out, put a big dent in the red drum population to the point where we have much more stricter regulations today. But blackening, very popular technique. Again, good with, I know people do it with tuna. I think I associate it with white fish.
Yeah.
Sea bass,
good. It's good with everything.
But that's something where you want like a denser, firmer fillet. Yeah. So I don't know that I would want to blacken like winter flounder, but I would blacken more like.
For me, if I'm blackening something, it's because the fillets are getting a little long in the tooth, or maybe it's not the most tasteful fish to eat. But I'm one of the guys that comes down on I want to taste the fish I'm eating, especially if it's
flavorful.
Yeah, it masks a lot of it. It's great. I mean, blackened mahi tacos are phenomenal, or blackened mahi sandwich. Blackened anything is good. It's just it's overpowering a lot.
So when you said the fillets are getting a little bit long, the late Dave Arbeitman, owner of the Real Seat Bait and Tackle, I was talking to him years ago about his favorite recipes, and he said, "Man, when I first catch that fish, like I want the fish to shine through. But the longer I've had the fillet, or if I'm thawing it out," he goes, "that's when I go into the more and more elaborate recipes, because even though you could vacuum pack that fish the day of, put it in the freezer. Fish is still going to age in the freezer. Like it has a shelf life, even if you're freezing it, unless you have some sort of sub-zero super freezer. If you're tossing it in a chest freezer, just, in there with the ice pops,
I always liked how that guy thinks.
Dave Arbeitman, yeah, he was a legend.
He really was. And I subscribe to the same, approach. I mean, the fresher the fish, I start raw. Right, and then it graduates to blackened or smoked for me.
So we saw a lot of the classic one. I feel like this is the seafood recipe 101, where make a little packet out of aluminum foil, dump a bunch of Italian dressing on the fish, and toss it. Make a little pouch, toss it on the grill, and that is like the first recipe I learned for seafood that wasn't frying it.
Yeah.
And that's just a classic. And that is a great way to do it. You've got it's one ingredient besides the fish,
sure,
tossing the foil on the grill. And what's nice about that and the blackening is it is, a little. I guess they're a little healthier too than just the deep frying. Somebody said fried bluefish. I've never had fried bluefish. Only ever grilled. Let me look.
Do you even need to use oil?
I don't think it's that oily. I just kidding. Here's another good one, and I did this for a little bit. Pancake batter. So instead of like a beer batter, you have the pre-made pancake mix. You can add water to it or just beer, and that's a nice easy way. You don't have to worry about too many ingredients. Different take on it. Gives it more of a
fish corn dog deal.
A little bit of a fish corn dog deal, but it's not bad. I prefer the panko to that. Cajun spicy fish tacos. A lot of people like the fish tacos, and the picture I used to with this question out there was kind of a fish taco display that you'd taken.
Oh,
I stole from your Instagram, and it had all the accoutrements around the side. So tell me, construct a fish taco for me.
Ooh. I mean, meat, heat, sweet, and
can we get a little more specific?
Yeah. So, give me a fish.
Mahi.
All right. So, lightly blackened mahi. I like it better than fried. It just feels healthier. So get that. Make sure it's not watery. That's the worst thing for a taco is a watery piece of fish in it, because then everything you add on it just makes it a watery mess. So lightly blackened mahi fillet, and then I'm gonna go with like a mango salsa, some pickled red onion, some like a quick slaw with like a spicy mayo. I usually keep spicy mayo, wasabi mayo, and eel sauce in the fridge throughout the whole offshore season. So I'll go with spicy mayo and like just some shredded cabbage and stuff to give it a little crunch. Dress it up with a little lime and put some of my favorite hot sauce on there. And the mango brings the sweet, the jalapeno and the hot sauce brings the heat, and then you get a little texture balance with the slaw with some crunchy cabbage in there.
Is cheese acceptable in a fish taco?
Certain cheeses. I will allow cotija cheese or a cheese that crumbles like that. That's very mild, but I have completely headed home to go and cook something that I wanted to do panko, like crunchy tuna for sushi, and realized that my panko was already seasoned with pecorino cheese, and I'm like, not doing that. So I call an audible. Well, so like it has to be that kind of like cotija cheese. I feel like that's the only one that works.
So if you're not making fish tacos, is the pecorino cheese seasoned panko acceptable then?
No,
fried fish?
Not for fish at all. It gives it a weird taste for me. Okay. That like real Italian, like that hard cheese flavor, it just doesn't work on fish. And I could make an exception if it was like a really dense piece of fish that I'm gonna broil, like a big piece of halibut, or I've done it with big tile fish. Larry Backman gave us a recipe that had like a grated cheese topping on it that kind of caramelizes up nice. I remember that, yep. The fish has to be really dense to stand up to that, in my opinion.
Okay, so that was kind of the gist of it. Thank you to everybody that responded. Jamaican Jerked saw one. Tin Pan with melted butter, mustard, and spices. And that's one of those where you're getting more of the flavor of the fish too. You're less in there, so a very fresh fish. That's a good one for that. Now, I will tell you my go-tos are way less elaborate, I'm sure, than yours. I know you're much more of a chef. I am more of a let's just cook this and eat it. I never cook it in a way that's good enough to take a picture of and share on Instagram. So I'm a little ashamed of my food presentations, but they taste good.
That's all that matters.
My go-to, and it's the probably least healthy way to do it, is the butter and the crushed up Ritz crackers, and you bake it, and you put a little bit of lemon juice on there. That is an absolute comfort food, crowd pleaser. If you have people coming over and you've got some fresh fish, that's the go-to. People are never disappointed with that one.
It's delicious.
Yes. So that's very good. The other one I do, and for a while I was kind of fooling myself saying I was doing this for the kids, And when I saw them picking the breading off it, I realized I was just doing it for me. I continued on, and it is the crushed up Captain Crunch. And then using that instead of breadcrumbs.
Really?
So you do like the standard, put the fish in flour, put in the egg wash, and then threw a bunch of pulverized Captain Crunch with some salt in there. And Joe Cermelli gave me that recipe, and I completely made fun of him for him. Like, this is ridiculous. It sounds like a great way to ruin a batch of fish. But it's actually pretty good. The fat kid in me loves it. My kids hate it. They pick the Captain Crunch right off it and just eat the healthy fish.
Are you in the 3rd grade?
Try it. I can't believe you've never tried it.
I've never tried it.
What
I
size
don't think
are you?
I will. I'll try it at your house.
All right. And then my other standard go-to, and this one's for tuna, is sashimi pizza. And you dug up that recipe for me. And from the outside looking in, it looks like a very complicated recipe to do, but there's ways to really simplify that. 1, don't make the scallion pancakes at home. Just order them from your nearest Chinese restaurant. 2, prep those sauces in bulk ahead of time. So a sashimi pizza it's not an actual pizza. It's a scallion pancake, raw or seared tuna. I've actually really liked kind of some seared tuna on that recently. And then 3 sauces, wasabi mayo, sriracha mayo, and eel sauce, and then some microgreens on top. So if you prep those sauces, make those ahead of time, have them in little squirt bottles ready to go in your fridge. Making that is as simple as cutting up the fish, picking up the scallion pancake at the Chinese restaurant, and then putting it together. And that has been my favorite tuna recipe, although I know you recently dug into a new one for you.
Yeah, first I got to credit my buddy He Tran, owned Dalat on Nantasket Beach with that recipe or that concept in general. Was one of my favorite restaurants. They're just shutting down shop, which is terrible because that place was phenomenal. But I got to credit him with that. Tuna sashimi pizza was great. I do like the idea of searing some and keeping some raw. I feel like that would give it another depth of flavor. I never thought of that, but that's great. I haven't had one in a long time. I haven't made one in forever.
With all the tuna you've eaten this year, you haven't done sashimi pizza?
So like I'll just kind of keep it to my favorite tuna preparation is I'm
on a first name basis with the people from Golden Sales. It's the guy who only orders scallion pancakes and doesn't want them cut.
Do not cut it. I'm a big poke guy. I love making poke bowls. It's
nobody wrote that, and I think it's because I wasn't specific to tuna, maybe. But I expected to see a few poke bowls.
So my process with fresh fish is less is more to start, and then it gets more elaborate. And as the fish gets a little longer, I try to use as much as I can before I freeze it. And if I do have enough to freeze, I try to freeze it right away, super dry, and vac sealed it for later. But typically not tuna. I try to eat all that fresh. So I start out raw, like with a lot of species, like making sashimi platters. You'd be shocked at how many people lost their minds about how good big porgy that you could fillet was on a platter that also had big eye tuna on it, and I think black sea bass. And I take it with the red gochujang sauce, and then also a soy sauce wasabi mixture. Those are the 2 dipping options. But I've loved going the sashimi platter and then kind of moving on to a poke bowl, which I'll run through my poke bowl real quick. It's usually you get your tuna, you cube it, you get soy sauce, some ginger, some green onion chopped, and hot sauce, usually sriracha, a little bit of honey, and mix that up, put it back in the fridge, and then you start. The key is cutting the vegetables the same size. I just recently invested in a mandolin, which is super helpful for this stuff. And then the rest of my poke bowl is typically some kind of a sweet fruit. I used mango in the last one.
You ever tried watermelon?
I haven't, but I bet you that would be just as good. So mango, avocado, cucumber, red onion, and shredded carrots, and edamame. So that's kind of what does it. And then I top it with, the black and white sesame seeds, and then the eel sauce, the spicy mayo, and the wasabi mayo. And I just found a bag of these dried edamame, wasabi flavored, I guess an edamame is a bean. So I'm like, this is going to be,
soybean.
it was almost like it's a soybean. It's almost like a chickpea type texture, the dried chickpeas. And I asked my buddy, I'm like, this is not going to work whole in these, in these poke bowls. And he's like, no. So I smashed it up and I put that on top and it gave it a little crunch and that was awesome. Topped it with some cilantro, some chopped cilantro and some pickled red onion. Love that. And I've also gotten into enjoying like the less select pieces of the tuna. I've been doing a lot of smoked, grilled tuna collars. I got yellowfins ready to go right now, yellowfin collars in bulk. So I'm interested to see. I don't think they're going to match up to the bluefin. I think the bluefin tuna collar reigns supreme. And I take the tuna bellies and I brine them with the collars for, 24 to 48 hours in a brine with just soy sauce, water, brown sugar, and like a quarter cup of hot sauce. And let that brine out. And then the key is drying it out on a wire rack, getting some circulation on it, some air with a fan, and building a pellicle skin. It makes it like sticky, and that allows the smoke to stick best to it. So I'll put that on the smoker and let that go in the smoker. The collars I'll take and put back in the fridge, wrap them up, and they'll go on the grill. I'll basically light them on fire, and that brings a char to it. And then I'll dress it up with like usually some sort of like a soy ginger, green onion, like sauce just to dress it up a bit. And then the tuna bellies, I let those come off the smoker and rest. And when they're, room temperature, I portion them out, vacuum seal them, put them in the freezer, and those are future boat snacks, which are phenomenal on some Ritz crackers when, you're 50 to 100 miles offshore.
So you said a couple things that made me think of one of my favorite, like on the boat, eating the fish meals. Like we took a fish we caught on our way in, cut it up into sashimi, and then put it on wasabi and soy sauce flavored Triscuits with a squirt of lemon. And that is just that they are hard to find. I Googled them right now to make sure that you can still get them, and you can still get them. Yeah. But that was a really great, like, I think that was Fluke we were using with that.
It was like pretty much the Fluke ribbons. Jeff Fiamari was like, wait till you try this. And we had a boat limit of Fluke, and he basically took the ribbons and sliced them almost like sashimi style, and a little bit of lemon on that cracker. Oh.
And that's just as simple as it gets. So from the very elaborate smoking the tuna collars to just cutting the fish, putting on a cracker with a spritz of lemon. I mean, there's so many ways to prep your fish.
There's no wrong way to eat a species.
So you can break out of the old like Italian dressing in the foil packet, out of the frying, and this is the best time of year to do that because it's the season of harvest, dude.
Yeah,
harvest moon's coming up.
Last little note, I've been introduced to my new almost favorite fish. Day caught, like really fresh swordfish is really hard to beat. And I recently lucked into catching some northern pufferfish, which people call them sugar toads. And man, oh man, I was like, Jimmy, what do I do with these? What do I do with these? He's like, clean them. You basically just take the whole tail. It's really kind of easy. You find a soft spot behind the head. You cut through the backbone, drive your fork through the front of that piece of meat and pull the skin right off. And you're left with a perfect tail with one center bone in it. He's like, it's just like a drumstick from a chicken wing. Fry that up, and dude, it was the best tasting flesh it's some of the best I've ever had. It's really sweet. It almost has like a bay scallop sweetness to it with kind of like almost like a tog / triggerfish texture. It's got a little...
It's really dense.
Yeah, it's dense.
And this is something that people in the mid-Atlantic have known forever.
Yeah.
I mean, since they call them sugar toads because of that really sweet, delicious meat, and toads because they are kind of goofy looking little fish. But the northern puffer fish, it's not poisonous. It's not toxic. So people think of puffer fish like you can't eat them. There is a species up here, the smooth puffer fish, which gets a lot bigger. Don't eat that. That'll poison you. Yeah. Fugu puffer fish is the very famous one where you have really highly trained chefs who cut a little bit out of, I forget what organ it is, but one of the organs is very toxic. They cut a little bit of that and serve it with the fillet, and it's supposed to make your mouth tingle, give you just a little dose of that poison that adds some excitement to the eating. I would try it. I would love to try it.
Those sugar toads were amazing. What I ended up doing is I grabbed some flour and some Old Bay, mixed that together, seasoned the fish, rolled it in that.
It looks like a butterflied shrimp, the finished product. When you fry it, and the taste is as good as it gets. I think it is the best eating whitefish you get up here. We don't get them that often here in New England. We caught them on Cape Cod. It's September, so water temperatures are at their absolute warmest of the season. They get them more consistently from New Jersey. South Long Island has them. The first time I ever ate them, the first time I was introduced to them, was my dad and I were in Montauk surf fishing. Driving back, we had a great week up there, and I forget the name of the place, but there was a little seafood joint as you were coming out of Montauk on Route 27, and they had out on their chalkboard on the side of the road was fried blowfish. Special of the day, fried blowfish. So we weren't even that hungry, but I remember being like we got to try this. We pulled in, and they give you the plate of, like I said, looks like a bunch of fried butterfly shrimp, and I was blown away by how delicious they were. They were so good. It's funny. Two of my favorite seafood things to this day, my dad and I found at the end of surf fishing trips. The other one was fish cheeks, and that was in the Chatham Squire. We were here visiting from Philadelphia, visiting Chatham and surf fishing on the Outer Cape down to Chatham, and went into the Chatham Squire, and the special of the day was cod cheeks. So those are two like seafoods that I continue to chase to this day.
That was another that blowfish prep was another instance where I went into the pantry and I'm like, oh no, I only have pecorino flavored. So I ended up throwing some Ritz in the food processor, and then dredged the Old Bay seasoned flour, fish, egg wash, and I pressed it into the Ritz crackers. Then I let them chill in the fridge for 30 minutes and deep fried them, and so good.
Well, I hope we get a chance to catch some more of those, but we're going to be talking about, or you're talking with Eric about much bigger game than blowfish.
Yeah. So tune in, enjoy Eric DeHedeville up next. Thank you for listening. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Cobia Boats, bringing you this episode of the On the Water podcast. From tournament fishing to cruising with family and friends, Cobia Boats will hook you with fishing features done right and comfort that doesn't quit. Check out their full line of center consoles and dual consoles at CobiaBoats.com and give them a follow on social at Cobia Boats. Choose Cobia and have it all. So what's going on, everybody? I'm Anthony DeCicci. You're listening to the On the Water podcast, and I have a guest that I've come to know for a while through a good friend of mine that I've fished with, that you guys have heard the name on the Offshore Report and some of the stuff that we've done. Matt Fronius, it's his uncle, Eric DeHedeville. He's been fishing. You've been fishing your whole life, right, Eric?
Yeah, really. It has been a lifetime devotion for me.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And 60-odd years later, I'm still at it.
That's awesome. So, like, how did you get into fishing? What was, like, was it as a child?
I would say, it was, they've got pictures of me probably 2 years old. I was looking at one, as a matter of fact, the other day, catching bluegills up at D.W. Fields Park in the Brockton area. And I grew up in Canton. And, we always had a big love for the Cape. And, as a young boy, started freshwater fishing, shown how to do it by my father and elders. And it was something I never left, and just something I always had a strong identification with, and it's still that way today.
Yeah, it definitely gets into your blood. So you grew up in the Canton area.
Yeah.
Your mother was a school teacher, I believe, right?
Yeah, Joan.
Yeah, and you guys started to kind of summer down the Cape.
We did. Earliest recollections, we always took the last 2 weeks of August to be down here in Falmouth.
Yeah.
She'd rent a cottage over off of Seacoast Shores. Just thinking the other day how different it is today. It wasn't long, mid-'70s, I think 76, that she really, really wanted to get us moved down here. And I think at the time I was somewhere around 12 years old, 11 or 12, just in middle school age. And she did. She had an opportunity to purchase a piece of land through a friend, and went for it. And her and my grandmother sold their houses. My mother more or less raised us 3 children alone, my brother Danny, sister Denise. My grandmother sold her house in Stoughton, and we left Canton, and she built a house in 76 down here.
That's awesome.
And it was just a wonderful blessing to grow up on the water, way down the end of Seacoast shores.
Yeah.
Nice dock and in a beautiful environment for 2 brothers like Dan and I to grow up.
Yeah, Dan's a big fisherman too.
Huge, yeah.
So you guys basically grew up probably fishing like the right in the backyard for saltwater. What was your first few saltwater experiences that you remember?
Yeah, I really think it was fishing for scup, things like that. Nothing was safe in Eel River when we were young kids. I mean, snapper blues, anything to swim we caught, and that naturally progressed into pursuing things like, schoolie, striped bass, bluefish, and all those beautiful things that thrive in those backwaters. Blue crabs, anything that swam, crawled, shellfish. We were just into it. Never had a shirt on. Always bathing suits, and that's all we did.
Bathing suits, bare feet, and suntan bodies. I mean, I grew up on a peninsula, so that was my upbringing too. It's fun just exploring.
Yep.
So I can't speak for you, but for me, I always I was lucky. My dad had a boat, and we did that whole thing. So, but when he was working, I was always kind of looking for that next best thing. So it came to I'd find a washed up those black floats that float a dock from a marina. Yeah. I'd find those, and I'd grab an oar from an inflatable and start paddling around in that to try to get out on the water and build a boat, so to speak.
Yeah. We had a neighbor that had an old rowboat, and we were able to utilize that for just about everything. And it was just a full-on, charge to try to get to owning our first boats, which we did. Skiffs, aluminum boats, anything we could use, we did, and eventually low horsepower outboards.
Yeah,
we'd pursue, and then nothing stopped us. My mother always said she was amazed that both of us lived. Some of the things we did,
right.
I remember later on when I had my first 18-foot fiberglass center console. It was just a beat up old one, and I used to night fish.
Yeah,
down west of Middle Ground and down along the Elizabeths, and I was too young to drive at the time. I was 15 years old. We kept the boat on a mooring. I'd steam down from Eel River all the way to the west and night fish Google-Eye swimmers on wire line on Middle Ground and the Rips.
Yeah.
So it was just a devotion that it was just unstoppable for my brother and I.
Yeah, and you always have your eyes to the next furthest thing you're gonna do and go, and that always used to get me in trouble with my father. Like, we had a rule that I couldn't go outside of the Hull gut, and one time I was coming back in and I was well beyond the gut, and I saw his diesel truck pull up to the point, and I was busted. So, I paid the price, and I just kind of laughed and said, "Hey, man, fish make me do stupid things, Dad."
I can identify.
So what was, I've kind of, spent a lot of time exploring Eel River and Wacoit Bay and stuff. Give me a sense of what that was like back then compared to now. It has to have been different.
Yeah, from a biological standpoint or environmental standpoint, it's so much different. And I look back on it. Growing up in those years on those river or waterways, Wacoit Bay was much more pristine. There was just acres of eelgrass thriving. You could count on almost every October there'd be a big scallop set of bay scallops, and you could harvest those. Much less boat traffic. I mean, the yards locally didn't have rack storage, so just the volume of people and machinery on the waterways wasn't there, and it made a huge difference from my perspective of what it was like and what it's like today. Not that there isn't opportunity today, there is, but certainly it was more of a dependable, nurturing environment, and we were coming from a place of harvesting rather than trying to restore because the damage wasn't quite done.
Yeah. Yeah, that puts a stress on the environment. Obviously, the sheer numbers of people now that the Cape is as popular as it is. You mentioned scalloping, which is kind of always one of those quiet, like if you find a honey hole, it's that. I was told a story that seemed like I wanted to ask you about it, where you and your brother put out your first dredge.
Yeah.
And it kind of didn't go as planned.
Right.
What was the context of that? Like, give me, like, paint that picture of like why a dredge? Like, what was your thought process?
Well, basically, we had been told about dragging for scallops in the channels, which legally you could do within the marked channels in all the waterways, as I remember it right. And you know, there were a lot of scallops being caught places like Little River or Monomoskoye Island, and inside, even inside the Eel River down towards the Yacht Club Washburn Island area. So we decided that we'd like to tow some scallop dredges, and we did. And
Did you buy a dredge?
Yeah, we did. There was it's kind of like a ship supply like they have in New Bedford, and there was one down in Chatham. So they came with the rings and the whole setup to press them and make them, and we did. And it was an old timer that we knew that helped us hang the twine in the sweeps, and we did that too. And I can remember the first time we went, and not knowing really how to haul back and all that stuff to dredges. We ended up getting, dredging along, and we ended up getting one caught in the lower unit of the outboard, and we put it in neutral, and one got caught anyway around the lower unit of the engine. And those outboards back then, the tilting mechanism was made of white metal. So we went to tilt the engine, and the mechanism broke off in our hand. Meanwhile, we were anchored by the stern, and it was choppy, and we ended up taking water over the stern, and lost the boat that way, and everything else. And we caught some scallops that way, and subsequently after, once we got the technique and into bigger boats, did well out in Vineyard Sound doing it. But actions have consequences, so it was definitely a
learning experience.
No doubt. So,
did you and your brother keep things cool, or was it chaos?
It's always chaos with us, And me being 5 years younger, it was. He was always sort of the
quick to blame the little brother.
Yeah.
That's too funny.
Yep.
So as you got into your teens and stuff, when did you start kind of fishing with other locals, and what was that like in those days?
Yeah, it was interesting and how that all kind of panned out. Really, my recollection would have been about 15 or 16 years old. It was time to go to work, according to my mother, in the summertime, and I wasn't too big on that idea. And what happened was I took a job. Actually, I shouldn't say I took it. She took it for me at a local restaurant, and my job was to wash dishes. And by that time, as I say, I had been shell fishing and catching a lot of small stripers, and really focusing on those techniques. And by that time, I learned that there was money to be made on the water as a young kid.
Light bulb went off.
Yeah, light bulb went off. Not only is this fun, I can make money at it. And I was intrigued by that and ran with it a bit. So she got me this job at a local restaurant as a dishwasher, and it was so crazy. I'd never dealt with anything like that. I think I had my working papers, 14 or 15, I can't remember which. I worked there one night, and when she picked me up, I was so horrified on what that kitchen was like. I said to her, I don't care what I have to do, but I'm never coming back here again, and I'm going to make my money on the water. And that's what I did. I scratched little neck quahogs, caught, at that time, there was no length limit on striped bass, so we could catch anything from 16 inches up, which I did, and medium, smalls, mediums, and larges, and I was able to do really quite well for a young kid, just being a waterman in the estuaries. And I sold striped bass, quahogs, steamers, plunge steamers, scratch little necks, and I was able to make a really good summer's pay doing that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when did you start, like, you that kind of gave you a taste of, making money on the water. Yeah. Where did it kind of go from there?
Well, it was interesting. I always were in awe. At that time, there was some really, really, we'll say, crusty old gent type chartermen around here. Then
This is like the old bass boat days and stuff.
Yeah. And I it's really funny how this thing happened for me. Sort of what happened was there was a day that my mother happened to be walking with a girlfriend. She was a school teacher, had a girlfriend down who was a school teacher, and she was walking the bulkhead at Falmouth Marine East. And she was down there, and she came home, and she said, Eric, do you know that big, beautiful red sport fisherman that you admire so much? And I said, you mean the tomahawk? And she said, yes. And she said, well, I met the owner today. I just introduced myself. And I told him all about you. And it just so happens he's looking for a mate on this boat. I said, you kidding me?
That's like an iconic, that's an iconic boat for these parts.
Yeah, and she said, yeah, it was a 46 Matthews, sport fisherman, custom built Philippine mahogany, beautifully maintained. And I had met him up till then. And I said, well, when are we going to meet him? And she said, well, not only are we going to meet him, he's going to take us out fishing tomorrow. So we drove down the next morning to the slip, which was on the east side, Falmouth Marine by the Flying Bridge there. And I met Perry E. Hall. And we went down, we went on the boat, and introductions and all the small talk, and he was intrigued by my knowledge of fishing at my age. And at the time, he had an ex-Coast Guard captain running the boat, and we went south of Nantucket and fished the shoals, Old Man Shoal, My Comet Rip, south of Sankaty, and we just had a wonderful, wonderful day. And on the way in, he said to me, I'd love to have you on this boat as a mate.
Wow.
And I said, I'm in.
What was it like mating on that boat?
It was amazing. I met the most amazing people. Mr. Hall was a investment banker, one of the founding partners of Morgan Garrity Truck Investment. Again, Morgan Garrity Trust Investments. Princeton graduated 1917, and he had quite a impressive, he knew affluence, but he also knew what hardworking people went through.
Yeah.
And he was really a mentor to me in so many facets of life's lessons. And he had guests of all walks of life. I mean, we had the Rockefeller family aboard, people like Bobby Orr. We had, and right down to local Falmouth people.
Yeah.
And he really, really enjoyed taking people out of that boat. And he gave everything we caught away, bluefish, bass, and eventually the following summer, we started harpooning swordfish, and that's where my experience started. Like I say, in the late 70s, offshore, pursuing pelagic
What
fishing.
was that like? Because that's the holy grail of harpoon fishing. Like, paint that picture of whose idea was it to say, hey, we're going to go harpoon swordfish?
Yeah, well, there was a small fleet of boats, and I want to start this off the right way, that were privately owned, but also a commercial fleet, mostly based out of places like Menemsha, Westport. There was also 3 or 4 boats that fished out of Agertown on the Vineyard, and they pursued and harpooned broadbill swordfish on these grounds. And these grounds started from, the swordfish grounds were basically south of Nomans in the dumping grounds area. At that time, east to like the Nantucket Lightship, and there's a lot of places, the Corner Buoy, the Banana Buoy, they call it, all the way, and then south from there, which were the canyons.
So largely, a lot of that whole stretch is largely considered inshore these days. It's
by all
dumping
means,
grounds.
Right. And for me, and these were real fishy guys. You've got to remember, I remember on the Tomahawk, we had a automatic direction radio finder, and you'd have to mix the signals and try to get a position. We had no Loran at that time or anything like, the technology we have for location or even fish finders or any of that stuff. But what I'd like to say is, you would steam south of Nomans and get yourself in 120 feet, probably just inside like the claw area by today's standards.
Okay.
And you were considered, you would consider it's time to go up into the mast and start looking for finning fish. And it had to be pretty much greasy calm. But there were enough of a body of fish that on the right day when it was calm, they would show. And,
So how many, like, you get up in the mast, it's greasy calm. Would you see them every trip? Would it be kind of hit or miss?
yeah, it would be a little bit hit or miss. The species that were out there, we saw a lot of. Obviously, it was covered in sharks, blue sharks, makos. Later, when the water warmed up, hammerheads. A lot of white marlin. We called them skillies at that time.
Yeah.
And that's actually, as much as I don't like to admit it, from a standpoint of learning to throw and hit with a harpoon, we were.
That was your target practice.
Those were our target practice, and they were, and I could sell them for $1.50 a pound.
Yeah.
And we did. But at any rate, it wasn't no everyday occurrence. But under the right conditions, we saw and got fish, and we'd go out to the dump. Usually, fish the 31 fathom hole, the fingers, and work our way to the east from there. And there were amazing fish to see, just amazing fish.
That's got to be a trip. I mean, it's mind blowing. Like I feel like everything with fishing kind of can be pretty cyclical. I mean, for one, you mentioned hammerheads late in the season from out of the shark species, and it's like, I feel like there's just this default mechanism in people's minds where it's like, oh yeah, it's global warming, the waters are warming, but like this is going back 40 some odd years, and there's hammerheads in the same grounds that I saw one in just a few weeks ago. So it's kind of the same old, with the exception of inshore swordfish.
Yeah,
that seems to be one of those things that's like, well, back in the day,
right?
They were there, and they were there in numbers that you could actually go out and target them, harvest them on a semi-regular basis. It sounds like.
And they were, and my experience harpooning swordfish, it's so funny to see how it developed over those years. It was a fishery in those years from the 50s through the 60s. So you had a small fleet, as I said, of boats that pursued them. Today, nobody's got a boat like that rigged with a pulpit. It just isn't done. So, people say, well, we don't see fitting fish. Nobody really,
who's looking for them?
Right. And I run into them when I'm tuna fishing, harpooning, different places. My feeling is there's probably some there that are still doing that. But there were enough boats going then that, they were. And then, of course, there was the incorporation of spotter pilots.
Yep.
So that sort of opened up a different frontier. And the commercial boats then stretched farther. They started discovering the canyons, where the real right down to the east side of Georgia's, which we call the fence or the hag line now.
So now you have the ability to have eyes in the sky.
Yep.
And that basically showed the local fleet what was beyond the further reaches that they've typically ventured. And what was that realization like? Do you remember when that started to kind of unfold? And I mean, just with the way my mind works, I would feel like we just discovered a whole new world.
Yeah, it really was. And, that was the difference between inshore, as you say, and having eyes in the sky that can see now underwater fish. Many of the fish that were there, we had a spot, meaning we had to see when a swordfish fins,
you got to be on the surface.
The dorsal and the tail are very identifiable.
Yeah.
And we needed those conditions without a plane. And, once planes were discovered, they naturally stretched out. And as they did, so did success. And the correlation between being in the right temperature water, things like bait, things like that started to unfold.
A lot of puzzle pieces got put together.
Yeah. And later in my sword fishing career, I was able to fish with the Mayhew family out of Menemsha on the Quitzer Strider and the Unicorn. And from there, it was basically steaming south to Veach's Canyon and working the canyons right down to the Canadian line.
So when you would do that that would be more long lining, right?
No, that was harpooning.
Oh, that was harpoon fishing too.
And eventually, at the end, it went to using the drift net, which we only were able
Okay.
to use a couple years and didn't like using anyway, but it was,
How do you remember the first time you walked out on that pulpit to sling a harpoon at a?
I do.
What was that like?
I was 16. Mr. Hall, we all called him at the time, had promised me that if I saw a fish, and by the way,
So if you spotted the first one, it
Yeah.
was yours.
By the way, fishing at that time, you became really good at seeing fish. You spent so much time in the tower or up aloft looking that whether it was tuna or anything you were spotting, the time you spent up there, your eyes became really crisp and good, and mine had. And this one day I think we were just down by the 31 fathom hole, and he had promised me, and being a southpaw or left-hander, I had to rig the pulpit on the opposite side for me to pick it up and throw. And it was a greaser or a calm day, slick day. And I can remember it was midway through the day, and I looked off to my 11 o'clock, and there were two great big sickle horns going along, just wagging his tail. And the captain told me to go ahead and head out, and I did. And I whacked my first fish, and it was disappointing because at that time, as soon as we hit the fish, he would run off some line, but we had a big 2 sash weights clip on a long line clip to the line, and to keel the fish over on its side, and he wouldn't tow as long that way.
Okay.
And this fish, for whatever reason, started breaching. And I remember looking at him breaching. What a beautiful fish he was. We went right on him, and he sat. I mean, I ironed him right under my shoelaces. He never moved, and I drilled him, and off he went, and he started shaking and tail dancing a bit. And I could see the sash weights, and he pulled a dart.
Oh, so that makes sense. Those weights are just flying all over the place, and it
Yeah,
ended up pulling
It
the
was a crazy
dart.
fish, and it never since had I had one do that. And anyway, I did lose that first one, but right shortly after, I got another opportunity. We got him big, beautiful, 350-pound dresser. Big,
That's a
big,
big
beautiful,
fish.
big fish. They were out there in the dump, and they were nice. Yeah, they were nice, big fish.
They all tend to be real mature, big fish.
Real big fish out there. Like down in the southeast parts of Georgia's, the average dress weight was like 250, where these were like 300s.
Wow.
And nice big. We used to call them soakers. They'd be just.
That's got to be close to a 500-pound live
Yeah.
weight swordfish.
Yeah.
What's the biggest swordfish you guys ever saw?
We got one that dressed. I think it was about just under 500, and that was down by the old lightship grounds, and out there, and then up in the northern edge of Georgia's, we'd see those big ones too. And it's funny because most of them look really purple in the water, and those big soakers always sort of look brown when you come up on them,
They're aged.
Yeah, but it was, for me, it was I'm very blessed in a lot of ways, I mean, it's how you measure your life in success or gifts you've received, and being alive and thriving during those days of the old harpooners and learning to harpoon the way they did and being able to do it is a blessing. I don't know if we'll ever get back.
That's literally on the forefront of of big changes. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have the electronics, but a plane comes into play. I mean, how
Yes.
big of a revolution is that?
It was
And next
huge.
thing you know, you spread your wings,
Yeah.
and you get a taste of something that at that point in time, you guys are literally pioneering that fishery to
Yeah.
not even to an extent. You are. That's got to
It-
be pretty special.
Not many guys wanted to fish spot swordfish because it meant a 3-hour flight to the grounds just in the plane.
Yeah.
And we were a day and a half getting there in the big boats. And, so there was that facet.
It's a big commitment.
Yeah, it was a big commitment, but also a danger commitment. Most of the old crusty spotter pilots, every single one of them put a plane in the water once or twice, So, I mean, it was and not that by today's tuna spotting, it's any less dangerous and certainly less planes now, but it's different. You break down in the boat, you sit there. You break down in the plane, you've got a problem.
How does that end up playing out?
Yeah, it's strange. I've talked to guys that have ditched them, and Alan Costas from Nantucket. They'd a lot of times hook up and fly out to the grounds tandem.
Yeah.
Everybody really got along out there, and it's just something that not many guys really did because I think that danger factor.
Sure.
And then later, obviously, the influx of both price and availability of giant bluefins brought that harpooning facet to a different, which we
Different
participated.
focus.
Yeah.
So, like, do you know people that ditched a plane and
Sure.
live to tell it? Like, how does that play out?
Yeah, well, I know like one of the guys I swordfish with was an avid fish spotter. He spotted for us and his brother on the Unicorn, and basically he flew out. He was in a circle. And you're at 500 feet usually, so there's not a lot of time to recover. And John's plane ended up stalling, and he started for what he thought was a sword boat, ended up being a commercial scalloper. And he figured he was going to ditch it there because he knew he was putting it in.
At least it's going to be close to some help. So,
Yep.
You just try to touch it down like gingerly and let yourself out.
This is what they've related to me. I'm not a pilot,
Of
but
course.
that's what they say. It's just like usually the conditions are good because they need to be for harpooning.
Yeah.
That lends itself to that. But just before you land, you pull her up so that the tail goes in first, and you kind of can bring the nose down and hope she skids right, just like skipping a rock. Some go smooth, some don't. And I know a guy like Teddy Malley, he put his on the beach at Chatham, almost made it in, but didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't easy getting insurance if you were in the fish spotting category, which I've done some of, but I just assumed
Your brother
you're on the
flew a
boat.
lot, right?
Yeah.
So, before we segue into the market that the bluefin tuna brought to the fleet, what are some of the you're in literally the boats and planes of those days, and just from the stories that my dad and his crew told, in these old Mackenzies and wooden boats, and the type of seas that they would find themselves in at times. Like, what's the most scared you've ever been out on the water? From back then, pushing the limits.
Looking back, I mean, I can remember being on the southeast parts harpooning and getting a snap of wind. We were 3 or 4 days from home. I mean, when the boat only goes 7 knots, and once you're a couple 100 miles down towards the line, the hay line, you're just not turning home. And I've been in 50, 60 knots of wind to where we had to lay on a sea anchor for maybe 3 days like that. And they used to use the old parachutes from fighter jets as sea anchors. And you deploy them, and the shrouds would screw up, and it was a big process to get it done. But,
how do you get that back in the boat?
You really don't. You try to trip it, and if you can't, you discard it. You cut the shrouds and just leave it. But they'd get them surplus and keep them for emergencies. And I laid on the Unicorn for 3 days once in 50 knots of wind, and she lay pretty good with her arms down and her birds in the water. But it's always been on a little bit of a smaller scale that, and I've had 2 real close, imminent type situations that I've lived through, and it was both of them were harpooning tuna fish on inshore more. But it's one of the situations when things go bad, they go bad real quick.
It happens very fast.
I mean? And they did.
So, all right. Moving into the tuna stuff, give me a timestamp. What year are we in?
This probably would have been for me entering that fishery 1981, 82, starting off hand lining tuna with hand lines.
Yeah.
Up on Stellwagen and down behind Noman's and places like that.
Yeah, the gear really wasn't on the rod and reel side of things
We didn't
yet.
use rod and reels other than the guys that trolled for them.
Yep.
And the introduction to using rods was we'd catch them on number 18 piano wire, mainland wire, and in hand lines, and that had its own dangers. I never really had a bad situation with that, but it could have gone that way.
That can go south.
And it had for some of the guys. But that was the time zone. Everything was at the threshold. There was nobody using mono
Yeah.
or rods, much less things like fluorocarbon.
Yeah, of course.
And all these tiny Japanese hooks that have come out
Yep.
and that I'm using, that everybody's using. So I was really able to live and witness and utilize the learning curve of all this equipment.
So that all came to be, that market was established by the Moonies.
Right.
And
their own
before
fleet.
that, people were out there fun fishing and trying to figure
Sure.
out how to get these monsters to the boat.
Yep.
I've heard my dad was doing it in
Yep.
the 60s and 70s. And, you know, the stories of failure were of epic proportions. Nobody got hurt, but like, you know, people were pulled in the water. I
Yep.
remember one story, his buddy Jerry Giagrando
Yep.
had borrowed a customer's boat, an old 40er.
Yep.
And they had this one fish in the slick that just wouldn't eat a baited hook, probably because it was, you know,
Yep.
quite a rig, I'm sure. And Jerry ended up getting really frustrated with this fish. And they said, the next time it swims by, I'm going to stick the harpoon in it. And they didn't think further than that.
Yeah, right.
So he ended up tying it off to the I guess the console of the 40, ripped it right off the boat, had to bring the boat back from Stellwagen to Waveland Marina in Hull, and apologize to his customer who tore off the top side of his 40. So super powerful fish, a bunch of dudes out there just figuring it out. And then kind of, you know, the Moonies come in and establish that, hey, we have a market for this. How did that kind of play out? How did you get involved with that?
Well, it's funny. That was probably around 1982 for me. It was a tuna bite at the Claw, and my experience up till then was up on the North Shore, up in Stellwagen, and we went out there. The Mooney boat was there, and the buy boat, and he had his own fleet, the fisherman at the time. And what happened with that was, I started fishing up there and learning about how to catch these things. And
Take me through that learning process. How did that all unfold for
well,
you?
it was kind of crazy. I went out with a guy from Marshfield.
Yeah.
And sort of learned the technique.
Very fishy place.
Yeah, how to rig the lines and how to ring the snapper. So when you hooked up, it set the hook. And all that sort of thing.
So what is that set up like? Explain the mechanisms that come into play and how the rigging works and all that stuff to kind of give us a visual on that.
Yeah, well, we used a big, zinc plated hook, and then we had, at the time we used to use tarred line for what you'd call a leader today. This was before even 400-pound mono was a leader. And then from that went the main line or the warp line. Mm-hmm. So you'd set that out, and you'd predetermine how deep you wanted it, and that would be with either a lobster float or a little poly ball at that time, and we'd float it back in the slick. And we generally fish them, say a 60-footer, a 40-footer, and a 20-footer, a high floater, back behind the boat, and we chum.
Yep.
Continuously chum. And we even used fillet of dogfish for a hook bait because they were white and they flashed and they showed up.
Okay.
And so we'd rig ahead of that balloon, we'd rig what we'd call a snapper, and all it was is that you'd hitch on a piece of 100-pound Dacron,
Okay.
about a foot of that, and you tie that off to a stronghold on the boat. So when that fish hit the bait, it would act as setting the hook. It sounded like a .22 rifle going off. It would be a pow, and on you'd be. And
So the fish bites, it pulls the Dacron that's basically tied somewhere around the hook
stronghold, right.
to the stronghold, and that shock sets the hook into the fish's mouth, and then that Dacron breaks,
Yeah.
and it's attached to the float.
yeah, and you'd start it up, and you'd lay that main line over the rail, keep your feet clear. One guy would coil, and you'd use the rail as leverage and just start working the fish. If you had to, we used to have 300 feet of line on ours. You never wanted to let the ball go.
Of course.
Obviously, the other end of the rig.
Yeah.
You had a ball, and once things settled down, then you just work them.
Yep.
Just work them and work them over the rail of the boat and just fight them.
Yep.
And use gloves and use your like a drag. There was a technique to it.
Yep.
And it was
Basically
pretty
just
crude.
tug of war.
Yeah, that's really what it was.
And you get the fish close, and then you'd harpoon it and
Yep.
tie it off and do
Yep.
all that stuff. And the buy boat was right there. Like
Right.
it's basically a mothership
Yep.
that had their own fleet of boats that were I think a lot like the true world style, boats of today.
Yep, they were. They were more like, they looked like big 26-foot Makos, as I remember. And he even had his own. He had the hulls and the boats built for his fleet of followers that would fish out there. And it was quite a time.
So you'd bring the fish over to them, and they'd take it right from you. And
yep. But what was good, they'd always give you some totes of bait, and for smaller boats, it was the way to go. A lot of the boats that fish for these were lobstermen.
Yep.
In this method back then, were bigger boats that could handle getting these fish aboard. These fish were big fish, 100+ inch fish.
Yeah.
These were big dressers, and
were they end up paying you what, like a nickel a pound or something like?
Yeah,
how did that work?
never that low when I was doing it, but I mean, I remember, easily remember 60, 80 cents a pound for them.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Back then, I mean,
yeah,
it was a nice little
they
payday.
considered them cat food and sometimes fertilizer.
Yeah. Before that kind of took shape. I think my dad's biggest fish, he said he paid a nickel a pound to get rid of it because, it wasn't the market then.
Exactly. And I remember getting charged in the late 80s a fee for the dump because it was fish of no worth. You know what I mean? So.
Crazy.
We hadn't hit that big sushi market yet.
Yep. So now, how did this become kind of more of a family affair for you, your brother, your mom? Like, how did that kind of take shape?
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing. My brother and I always had a great affection for harpooning.
Mm-hmm.
So for giant bluefins in this area, you can be, there's a harpoon fishery. There's a general category, which is a hand line, a harpoon, or a rod and reel. And, this is, and of course, the seine fishery. We lent ourselves to harpooning because we were good at it. We saw fish. We liked the method. We saw fish well from the tower. And we just had a lot of experience harpooning bluefin.
Much easier than swordfish, I would imagine.
Yeah. In the distance, these were more of an inshore fish or an inshore type of...
a lot more accessible.
Yeah. So in 1982, my mother approached us and she says, look, you guys are both on different boats, both doing different things. Would you like, or would you consider the idea of teaming up and building a harpoon boat, a tuna harpoon boat? And that's
dude, your mother was a badass. That's like, I wish my mother offered me that.
She was. But with old Joni D from Dorchester, there was always a price to pay.
Yeah.
She wanted us to take it seriously, get our captain's license, and be able to rely on some 6-pack bluefishing and striper fishing. The boat we decided to build was a 31 BHM, and she was the bookkeeper person, and she secured a loan, a mortgage, if you will, to build this boat. And we ordered it from Blue Hill Marine in Maine, and went through the 1.5-year process of building this 31 BHM.
How old are you at this stage?
I'm 5 years older than Danny. I was 23.
Yeah.
Danny would have been about 18 or 19.
Wow.
So that's what happened. And we went through the building stages, not without problems. We wanted it. We ordered the boat in October and wanted it for June of the following year. And that ran like your usual boat building problems.
Of course.
In shaking out the whole deal. We were attracted to the hull. It was a proven hull. It was sneaky. It got up on fish well. And so we had to commission the building of that, also the fabrication of the tower and the pulpit, and come up with those designs and the whole thing and put this together. So
I love that term, by the way, a sneaky hull.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. And yes, they definitely were known for that and still are.
Yep.
So, all right, keep going.
So we built it, and we put all the little things we learned about, sound downing the engine room, quieting that, rubber mounts for the engine, anything we could do to quiet it down, and a good long pulpit. And of course, at that age, everything you think of as bigger is better. Same with the height of the tower and that sort of thing. So it was a pretty badass boat. And we didn't name it. My mother did, of course.
Yeah.
And
rightfully so.
yeah.
What did she name it?
So this was interesting. So we were tossing around names and this type of thing, and right towards the end of the build, there had to be a day come where the guy that was going to paint the name on it was going to be there to do it. And she said, "Well, look, I've come up with a name. You two have no say in it." So I figured it was going to be Joni D. the First or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, something sound like a New Bedford dragger. She said, "I want to name it the Relentless." And she said, "It's because of the way you and your brother go at things." And we did. And so that was the old Relentless, navy blue hull, a good boat. And here we were, two Cape Cod kids, rearing and ready to go. And we did. We went hard and fished it hard. At that time, I had just gotten married, and I was still commercial bass fishing in my own boat, striper fishing, which was a huge devotion of mine. And
We'll get to that.
yeah. And anyway, Dan, get these years right, was in University of Vermont as an English major. And basically, he fished with me. He was my wheelman. I was a striker. And the first summer was, it was okay. It wasn't great, but we caught some fish and learned a lot in terms of the program and running a boat like that.
Got to get that dialed in.
And then the second year, we were introduced competitively wise to a spotter pilot. So now these two kids had a spotter pilot to go with this program, and all hell broke loose. Nothing was safe from Montauk, New York to Jeffries up in Maine, and we fished hard and we fished like animals. And Dan had a great affection for the spotter pilot, and he was great, and he wanted to do that too. So what ended up happening was he took his lessons as a pilot, and he then entered into law school along with this, and bought his first plane. And we had the whole program as like an in-house thing. And Dan was extremely good at it. Not only was he good at seeing fish, he was a good, solid pilot, but he was a fisherman in a plane, which is different than you get with a lot of other planes.
Wow.
He knew how to hunt them down. If we weren't seeing fish, he'd say, "Fine, I'll go check out Jeffries." Or he'd fly 50 miles to go check out other grounds. He'd hunt them down.
That's awesome.
We'd go to him. So it was an effective method.
That's great. That's fantastic. Wow. That so did your mom ever fish with you guys?
Yeah, she loved to go. Funny sidebar with my mother. She'd love to go as long as she had her cigarettes and her Dunkin' Donuts coffee. She'd stand up in the tower, and she loved to go and go harpooning with us. In fact, it's so funny. She became so seasoned. This one summer, before Dan was flying, he got really sick. I forget what it was. And it was shingles. That's what it was. And he got too sick to go on the boat. So I used her as my wheelman. And the first fish she put me on, and I put her on blue shocks and tell her what to do and the whole thing. And she puts me on this fish, perfectly going away. 12 o'clock. I ran down out of the tower when it was like a boat and a half length out at 12 o'clock. She puts me on the fish, and I iron it. I whack it. And she just froze and didn't put it into neutral and ran the fish over. And ended up getting it caught in our wheel. But it was so cool. She was just such a team player. And just a tough, she was great that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That was her
amazing.
deal. She loved to go.
That's really cool. So, wow. That had to have been worth the price of admission to just experience that ride from the bottom up. Wow. So your love affair with striped bass, so little side note where I've gotten to kind of, some of my favorite by the dock conversations. I had my boat, when I had it, behind the place that you were living at on Eel River. And, you'd see me come in and we'd end up shooting the shit about fishing. And, I totally just lost. Oh, so, there would always be kind of like, hey, what did you get into, this and that? And then you'd end it with a little nugget of like, hey, back, I do really well with this here. It was always a little kind of, hey, look over here. And there were some things that came up. A lot of times it was striper related. It was actually related to whatever I'd be fishing for. And you would have said, hey, you'd be surprised at how many big fish we get in these backwaters in the spring. Yep. So I knew you were kind of really dialed in on the striper side of things. Yep. Did a lot of commercial fishing for them. Yep. What was you started off, jigging wire and stuff, yep. But you kind of fell in love with a different tactic that you did really well with. What was that?
Yeah. Doing it on a level of commercial fishing, I have to say, first of all, the years I started, late 70s, early 80s as a kid, our striped bass stock were awful at that time. That's when the species were basically
just
non-existent.
Post-moratorium, right?
Yep. And so to learn that on a level of being able to catch fish consistently was hard. But not only was it hard because they just weren't there to catch. You could be doing things right and just not have enough volume of fish to figure that out.
Yeah.
So, there were lessons hard learned. And I learned to fish like the good fishermen did. And it meant a lot of night fishing. Subsequently, once I, got out of the small boat, I had my first 19-foot Cape Carter built. I was in my prime, 18 years old. Sandy built me a boat, old enough to drive, tow it with an old John Boy pickup. And I went everywhere they swam. And I learned, to fish efficiently with live bait. Of course, back then we could trail to a herring run, put 100 herring in our tank. And I was thinking this the other day, that you could fish all day from Nonamesset Point down to Quick's Hole hard, and if you got 6 big cow bass on 100 herring, you were doing well.
Yeah.
That was really good. And by today's standards, first of all, we don't keep and retain herring anymore locally, alewives. But, you'd say, how could you do that compared to what the fishing would be today if you brought that same, volume of bait down? So I learned how to do well bait fishing, jig and wire trolling, and especially one of my best was the tube and worm, when not many guys were using it. So, I'd start out fishing the slack water in Woods Hole, work my way west, or if I wanted to fish the slack at West Chop, go over there. I could catch that half hour after Woods Hole, and then work my way along the Elizabeth. So it was learning the theory of having a lot of places to fish, like a hand of cards, and eventually
and when to be at each spot.
When to be it, and that was the precision. And then I started to understand as a fisherman the little things, and I always use this quote, is how to read the water. If you caught, why did you catch?
Yep.
What was the tide? What was the wind direction? And when you start to notice the little things like that, it becomes more than saying, hey, I just caught a 50-pound striper. And that was the transition from being more recreational into putting data together in my brain in repeatability.
Yeah.
And then, I used to always try, and of course, like along the Elizabeth Islands, there's so many places to fish because of structure.
Yeah.
That eventually, by trying some different spots each time on the way home, you'd get a sort of a hand of cards of where to be, when to be, and then what options to play with the wind.
Yeah.
Like it's blowing here today northerly. Well, I could fish down along the islands on the south side. If it's the opposite, then I can fish Barnstable, Wellfleet. And then you become sort of a seasoned Cape fisherman.
Yeah. So where did you first hear about that technique?
Yeah. I came in contact with other fishermen who are much older than me.
Yeah.
And they had a good handle on it. It really kind of started in Rhode Island. You could probably remember, and I don't know, maybe you're too young, but when they first came out, there were like these packaged tubes that had glass eyes and there were beaded eyes and the whole thing. And, it was almost hard to believe that these fish would eat these with a sea worm on them. And,
that blew my mind the first time. My dad pulled one of those out of the package and said, hey, we're going to do this.
It
And
just
I'm like,
didn't
what
look
is that?
like it materialized.
Doesn't look like anything.
I realized that it was, in fact, something important to striped bass. It was part of their ecosystem that they lived in.
Yeah.
Hard bottom, grass patches, mussel bottoms, things like that. And it was, in fact, people thought it imitated an eel. It really didn't. It was a worm
Yeah.
that would hatch out and come out of the bottom. And it was a very particular way it swam, and they were crazy over them, like they are pogies or squid or any of that thing. And the real crusty older guys knew the presentation, and that was key. Also was the bend, the spin, in anything. You mentioned earlier about my upbringing. I started off, with trout.
Yeah.
And learned how important matching the hatch or presentation was. And that carried through my teenage years in every single fishery I've ever devoted myself. Presentation and matching the hatch has always caused the ability to excel at something.
Yeah.
And watching the little things. And that's what it was. And eventually, I saw it and I learned what it took.
Yeah, give us a little, all these years doing it. Like, what's the process of having that tube and worm just right?
Yeah, well, it's obviously a time of year they tend to eat it the best, like after the end of June in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Always was that way, July, and it's the presentation. You wouldn't make a troll against the tide. The tube would overspin and it just wouldn't present right. No, it would be, it presents the best like on a cross tide troll,
Okay.
a turn, usually a right hand turn, and experimenting with getting it close to the bottom because so it was a lot of wire line. I can remember with my Cape Codder, I'd have 4 different wire line setups, 2 lead core setups, 2 mono setups, and it was a very soft, slow presentation.
Yeah.
And you'd want it to spin. Usually, the tube just like a plug, had to swim right. And that just takes, we made these ourselves.
Yeah.
We'd get the latex tube and we'd buy the RIT dye from the hardware store or the drugstore. We'd dye them up.
Yep.
And we'd cut them, the inside, and make the wire, and then weight them just right, and the console in my boat probably had 50 hanging on it at a time.
Yeah.
And we learned under what light conditions, like a very burnt orange would work well as opposed to a cardinal red or a deep wine purple color. So there was all that fine tuning.
Little details.
Yeah, just no different than picking out a fly if you were to.
Yeah.
And the same as fly fishing. If I was walk up to a pond, in my waders with my fly rod, I'd know I'll start with a woolly bugger.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the tube and worm.
Yeah.
And then I'll refine it and pull it down, narrow it up.
How slow? What's your ideal trolling speed with a tube?
It's really, it goes to the spin of the tube, but really it's just above neutral as much.
Yeah.
And we do things to the jets at
Throw
that time on
bucket
our
out.
carburetors of our outboards.
Yeah.
As far as adjusting the orifices to get us that speed.
Yeah, and you want a really slow kind of a wind and turn to
it
that.
was kind of a very lazy turn, and present it that way. And as you said, the way you present it wouldn't be straight into the tide, and it wouldn't be straight fair tide because everything would sag down. So you learned, and that goes back to what I said about, okay, I just hooked doubles. Why did I hook them? What was I doing? What was the troll like? What part of the weed patch was I on? Was there a dog leg in that little part of the troll? So there was all the finer things, and then repeatability on that.
Yeah.
We had no plotters. Guys had none of, colored plotters or any of that stuff.
Sure.
Or even Loran bearings. It might get you to roughly the spot. So
You used land bearings a lot and stuff like that?
And we call them rangers, crossing a tower with a rock or something like that. And then, if nobody was there, I'd throw a lobster buoy for a marker. And then if, and focus on a good range in repeatability. And then, if guys showed up, I'd just go over and gaff the marker and pull it and just keep fishing.
Yeah.
That kind of would be the
little cat and mouse.
Yeah. But, we all had our tricks at that time.
Yeah, on the water columnist Charlie Soares is
Charlie's
a
a good fisherman.
big tube and worm guy as well.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
You ever cross paths with him?
I have, yes. Down around Westport, Hens and Chickens.
Yeah.
The cement barge down there. Yep, I have. Yeah, and he is, and I give him the ultimate respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
That's awesome. What's the biggest striper you ever encountered? There's got to be a fish story, like one that got away, or
Well, I've gotten
one that blew your mind.
11. I've gotten 11 over 50. But the biggest one for me was, and I have it mounted. My brother's a taxidermist, and he does skin mounts. And when I built my first house, that particular year, I was married.
Yeah.
In '84, and I was down along the islands, and I caught a 62 pounder, and he mounted it for me. And to be honest, I mean, I didn't do anything different to catch that or a 20 pounder.
Sure.
It's just the luck of the draw or the odds and the volume of time I spent on the water. But he mounted it for me, and it hung over my fireplace for quite some time, and I gave it to him. It's in his house right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. 11 over 50s. That's impressive. Like, what would do you remember every one of them, like, individually?
Not really.
No.
Some I do.
Yeah.
Just because of their builds back then, and I have to say, you know, it was nothing I did special back then. We had fish coming out of those when it was hard to catch them in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
But there were some really big fish to catch.
Yeah.
Well-built fish. You know, used to be a 50 pounder, had to be 50 inches.
Yeah.
It just had to be. And now you can get a 53-inch fish that'll weigh 30 pounds or 30, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So they were
yeah.
differently built fish.
Yeah.
You know, in all humility, you know, in my thinking, it was just the luck of the draw. But you know, different places, there were volumes of big fish. I look at, you know, guys that I looked up to, Frank Sabatowski, who I was friends with as a kid.
Yeah.
And all these cutty hunk fishermen, you know, they were on big fish.
Yeah.
You know, in those years, rather than volume.
What so today you're still fishing,
Yeah.
you know, pretty hard. You still do
Yeah.
a lot of striper fishing.
Yeah.
I mean, you buttoned a 100-inch plus fish your last time out right before the closure.
Yeah.
That was local, right?
Yeah, it was just south of Normans.
Yeah. That was a beauty. What did that fish eat?
Small bluefish, 3-pound bluefish.
Yeah.
And it was as difficult as putting him down at 40 inches from the balloon and swimming him out behind the balloon, the boat, and he went off. I mean, these fish are very, very active right now.
Yeah.
And
You've had a great year south.
yeah, it's been amazing. I love seeing that coming back.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I would imagine the yellowfin, the bluefin, like,
Yeah.
you know, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, that was right on our doorstep. There was swordfish and stuff.
Yeah.
It seemed like, I don't know how long it went back, but when I first moved down to the Cape in 2015, people had talked about, like, you know, south of the vineyard being great. And I had never really gotten into it too well until these last couple of years have been really good.
Yeah, and I've said that, you know, that will places like the Claw ever come back after that bite we had for 3 years from like 82 to 85 was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
It was all chumming, a lot of hand lines. That's where the introduction of the rod really started. But moreover than that, you know, what I've seen is, in my experience, these fish are now more reachable.
Yeah.
For small center console boats. Of course, back then we didn't have the kind of boats you know, everything tuna fish was, you know, usually well offshore.
Yeah.
Stellwagen up on the North Shore was considered close.
Yeah.
You know, you were fishing plats, Wildcat Knoll, all these, and off of Maine, off of Portland. Now, these fish, I mean, are on very inshore ground, so there's opportunity and there's accessibility.
Yeah. The bait's a big thing.
Huge.
When the sand deals are south, the fish are south.
They're south. And it's always, you know, the biggest thing is to find the life.
Yeah.
Hunt down the life, the bait, the whales, and there's going to be fish visiting that,
Yeah, exactly.
you know.
What's the biggest surprise? I mean, pretty much a lifelong spent on Cape, and for me, coming down here from growing up in Boston Harbor, the variety down here has been mind blowing. So, like, what are some of the crazy encounters that you can rattle off? We'll kind of get to bringing this to a close. what are some of the really cool surprises that you never thought you'd see in your own backyard, and there it is?
Yeah, I know. It's funny. The other night I heard of a tarpon caught off of Southgate Beach.
Yeah.
And I think I texted you a couple of years ago. I was with my wife down at the beach at Minot, just having some fun one night fishing cutbait. And I caught a 20-plus pound cobia.
I remember that.
I knew what it was, and I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, I can't believe this. I just caught a cobia on a chunk of mackerel. I just enjoyed an evening in a chair with my wife.
awesome.
I let it go. I didn't even know they were good to eat.
Yeah. Oh, they're delicious.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've seen an influx of that. I think, when I was younger, we never heard of a mahi being caught up here. And
Really?
now we have them. No?
Yeah.
I can remember once in a blue moon seeing them around lobster gear floats, but never seen them.
Yeah, I wonder if that was more of a boats out there with small gear type of thing. So you're not going to catch a mahi
Yeah.
when you're, well, that's not true because they'll eat spreader bars and all kinds of stuff. So
Yeah, they're very aggressive.
you're not going to catch one with a harpoon looking for
No,
swordfish down there,
no.
that's for sure.
No.
Cobia caught in the Northeast is definitely high on my bucket list. I feel like the guys down in Long Island and Jersey, I know they're targeting them now with some
Yeah,
success.
same with redfish. They're catching those up there.
Jimmy Fee from On the Water was just down in Jersey, and they got 2 redfish while they were sheephead fishing.
Yep.
Which is super cool. That used to be a red state back in the day.
Yeah. So I know, and I think it all goes to what we're all learning, whether you're commercial or not. And by the way, I just want people to know that I'm an avid outdoorsman. As I've mentioned, fly fishing. I'm a sport fisherman. I'm all about conservation.
Yeah.
The best and wisest use of a resource, both for everybody to have an equal opportunity to do this. And I'm grateful for that today. I really am. But getting back to what you were saying, I really think that there is that opportunity. I thought of one story you want, quick one.
Yeah,
if we have time.
absolutely.
You talked about close calls and harpooning. I wanted to mention this was the closest I ever came to perishing. I was out just east of, out on the 500 line, just out by Wildcat Knoll, and my buddy and I were out harpooning and working with a plane. And my brother flew to me and found some fish. And I went up at a bunch, and there was maybe a 2-foot chop, white water. And unlike swords, bluefin will come up and clip right along in that slot. And he put me on the fish, and I was up and down. Anyway, I ironed a fish out of that group, and we got him aboard. And he radioed down that there was another bunch. We went up on it, and we had a long pulpit on that boat. It was 27 feet over the water. And I went out in the end of the pulpit, and I could hear my brother saying, okay, the fish are at you 12 o'clock, 1 boat length. I looked out, and I could see the purple glow of the fish and the finlets, group of about 30 fish out there. And I remember picking one out and getting ready to lob at it, and we're into a head sea, and we're kind of snapping up and down. And before I kind of drew a bead on the fish, I was steadying myself out there, got situated, got ready to throw. And the pulpit became disengaged from the stem where the underbracing goes into the bow of the boat. We have a pin that we pull the pulpit up at night and lay it up on the tower. So I'm just getting ready to throw at this fish, and all of a sudden the whole pulpit started coming up. I dropped the harpoon, crouched down in the belly band, went halfway up, and then it raced down like a roller coaster. And when it did, the underbracing crashed into the stem in the whole pulpit. I went underwater with the pulpit, and the stay wires popped from the wheelhouse, and I had one wrapped around my right leg. So it's sinking out of sight, and I'm with it. And my buddy Stevie said, all I know is, Eric, I was watching you getting ready to whack a fish, everything go up, and you crashed down with it, and everything forward of the stem was gone, including you in the pulpit. And I'm sinking in 500 feet of water with a pulpit around my leg and kicking, and I was dressed pretty heavily that day. And it was wrapped around my leg and work boot, and somehow, by God's grace, maybe it was my mother watching over me, my leg came clear, and I started swimming for the surface. And he pulled me in through the wheelhouse door. I don't know how he did it, because I'm a pretty good-sized guy. Grabbed my forearm, me by the back of the belt, and got me in. Meanwhile, my brother from the plains watching, and he's buzzing the boat, and the whole fleet comes steaming over. So that was one of my closest. I've had others, but that just goes to show you.
Did the pin let go?
Did what?
Did the pin let go?
The pin disengaged from where it connected into the stem. Wow. So I went on those fish disengaged, but it was into a head sea, so the upward whipping.
Basically, whiplash, you broke away from the boat and just dragged you to the depths.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And it was God's grace, my boot kick, because I remember just down flooding, all the water rushing by my face and being pulled at an unbelievable speed through the water, and my boot came clear, and swimming, I could see gray light above me, and just swimming for that.
Wow. And, how long did it take to get back on a pulpit?
We had another one fabricated within a week, and I remember saying to my buddy Steve, it's a pretty calm night. I don't know if we'll see anything or not, but why don't we try this out in Cape Cod Bay first? The boat was in Marshfield. It was a 35 Duffy, and we just eked our way down into the bay, and I tried, but it did leave. I didn't know it then. I do now what a stigma it left on me, because it was. I mean, death was imminent. Had I not come clear of that plastic coated cable that was around my ankle, I wouldn't be sitting here.
You shook it off and went back. Well, went back for more though.
It took a little bit.
Yeah, I bet.
But anyhow.
Wow. What are you most looking forward to fishing wise out ahead?
Out ahead, I really, I think if season's going to run out just fine. We have this reserve we're going to fish on in September, and then some in October with the rods. I'm extremely looking forward to going rod fishing like I've been doing. I think there's an ample biomass around to catch, whether it's here to the south and out to the east off Chatham and up to the north side. So it's been good. Pick a spot and fish, and just fish hard. I'll probably be wanted to go north, or actually on the south side of the Cape come this Monday when it opens, and I think we're going to get winded out Sunday.
Yeah.
Monday looks very fishable, and just getting back on track. It's hard with these RDF or restricted fishing days.
Yeah.
To stay on top of them.
So Monday, what's Monday, the 4th?
Yeah, so it really opens Sunday the 3rd.
Yeah.
So it'll go back to open Sunday, open Monday, close Tuesday, open Wednesday, open Thursday, close Friday and Saturday. So, you saw, just when you get in a groove, how much time, but what I can say is, looking back in my career, we were never catching fish in December.
Yeah.
Roof and tuna. In last couple Decembers up in the north.
It's been good.
North end has been of the bank has been tremendous up on the high ground. So we'll see.
What's your favorite program now when you're rod and reel fishing with the giant? You still chum, or you just bait live bait fish?
All live bait now. I'm a structure fisherman.
Yeah.
I don't prefer to fish in places like Cape Cod Bay. I feel like when I'm fishing on an edge or structure, there's something I can do to help myself.
Yeah.
When I'm fishing
in the travel corridors.
Yeah, and that's basically it. Is lining myself up. Obviously there's premier spots according to that structure, and really that's what it is: hunting down the life, the bait, the whales, and keeping myself positioned, as we say, on the meat. What we're seeing, east, you've got places like Regal Sword and all that bottom around Chatham. On the backside, you have those raceways like Beacon Hill Bar. They make that hook around Wood End, and a few get in the bay. And obviously to the west, you've got, Stellwagen. Yeah. It's there's enough fish around where you can almost pick your poison and use your best techniques.
The giant fishing's been phenomenal, so it's nice to see that back in full swing, and it seems to be getting stronger and stronger. So
it is.
I love the fact that you're seeing a big class of fish. Unfortunately for the Stellwagen crew, and to some extent like the east guys, and north of there hasn't been many small fish, but there's a ton of small bluefin.
There is, yeah.
They just happen to be south with the bait and the life. It's just a great sign for that fishery.
It is healthy for sure.
I'm looking forward to the next time I get out and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, awesome chatting with you.
Nice chatting with you too,
thanks for joining us, man. This has been a trip. Really good stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate
all you guys. Yep. Take care.